皆さん、こんにちは、こんばんは、そしておはようございます。日本井戸端会議研究所です。
All right, let's just jump right in with a pretty wild thought, right? Imagine, what if a huge chunk of world history was completely different, all because one leader just really didn't like a particular rule? I'm talking about a choice that could have turned Russia into an Islamic nation. Seriously.
So to get our heads around this, we've got to go way back. We're talking the 10th century. There's this powerful state called Kiev Rus, and they're at this massive fork in the road. They have to pick a religion. And this choice, it's going to shape who they are for the next 1,000 years. And the guy making this call is Prince Vladimir I. Now, he was a pretty practical leader. He wasn't just going to flip a coin. He wanted to figure out which of the world's great religions would actually work for his people. So, what does he do? He sends his people out on a mission, a sort of spiritual fact-finding tour. They go everywhere to check out the amazing Orthodox Christianity of the Byzantine Empire and then over to the powerful Islamic world in Baghdad.
So his envoys come back, they give him the rundown, and you know what it all boiled down to? It was this one simple but really huge cultural difference. The team that went to the Islamic lands, they came back and said, look, this faith, it strictly forbids alcohol. And for Vladimir, and the culture of the Rus, where drinking was a big part of life, well, that was a deal breaker, a huge problem.
And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? The legend goes that Vladimir's response was super clear, no hesitation. He basically said that drinking is the joy of his people and there's just no way they could exist without it. And just like that, boom, he picks Orthodox Christianity. This one decision ties the future of the Rus to Constantinople and Europe, not to Baghdad and the Islamic world. A massive history-changing moment, all decided over a drink. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Okay, now let's jump forward in time a few hundred years, because believe it or not, another gigantic empire comes to a similar crossroads. They have to make a very similar choice. But this time, the outcome is the complete opposite, and it's going to change the face of the entire continent.
Who are we talking about? None other than the successors to Genghis Khan. You see, after that first incredible wave of conquest, the guys ruling the massive Mongol territories, places like the Kipchak Khanate, they had the same problem. They needed a single, unifying religion to hold their incredibly diverse empire together.
But here's the twist. Unlike Vladimir, the Mongol leaders, they went the other way. By the late 1200s, the Ilkhanate over in Persia converts to Islam. Then, in the 1300s, the super-powerful Golden Horde does the same. This one choice creates this massive Islamic power block stretching all the way across Central Asia and into Eastern Europe. And that, as you can imagine, completely changed the game, altering the balance of power with their Christian neighbors, including the very same Rus we were just talking about.
So you see, these huge decisions from way back when, they're not just some dusty old footnotes in a history book. They literally carved deep divisions. You can think of them like geological fault lines between entire civilizations. And what's really incredible is that you can trace the shocks from these ancient choices directly to some of the biggest, most stubborn conflicts we see in the world today. For hundreds and hundreds of years, you have these two major civilizational worlds, sometimes clashing, sometimes working together, sometimes just trying to exist side by side. You get huge events like the Crusades, then the long era of the Ottoman Empire, and then, much more recently in the 20th century, the creation of the State of Israel. All of these become these intense flashpoints right along those old fault lines, just piling new problems on top of very, very old history.
And this whole story isn't just about Europe and the Middle East. In the modern age, a whole new player jumps into the game, the United States. America, driven by its own idea of manifest destiny and, as the sources point out, some really strong religious beliefs from its evangelical communities, throws its weight behind Israel, and that support becomes a huge critical factor in how everything plays out in the region.
Okay, so if you want to see a real-world, tragic example of how these civilizational fault lines can just rip a single country to shreds, we need to talk about Lebanon. It's heartbreaking, really, because it used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. It was the shining, vibrant example of how different groups can live together.
So for a long time, Lebanon kept the peace, but it was a fragile peace. They had this really unique political system where power was split up very, very carefully between the main religious groups. So the deal was, the president would always be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister had to be a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament a Shia Muslim. It was this incredibly delicate, intricate balancing act.
But that balance just couldn't last. What happened was, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees, who are mostly Muslim, came into the country. This completely upended the country's demographics. It was like a shock to the system. All the old tensions came bubbling back to the surface, and by 1975, the whole thing exploded into a devastating, brittle civil war that lasted 15 years. That beautiful model of coexistence, it was just shattered.
You know, it's funny how so many of these stories, whether we're talking about 1,000 years ago or today, they all seem to lead back to one single spot on the globe, one city, a place built on layer after layer of faith and war, a place that's holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Yep, Jerusalem. The history of this one city is like the entire story of this civilizational clash in miniature. You had the Romans, then the Byzantines, then Islam arrives in the 7th century, then the Crusaders come storming in, and after that, centuries of Ottoman rule. This city has always been the ultimate prize, a place of prayer and a reason for war for so many empires and religions. And it's so important to remember this. The modern conflict didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was massively shaped by what happened after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell apart. You had these European colonial powers moving in, especially Britain. And Britain, well, they started making conflicting promises to both the Arabs and the Jews. They were drawing lines on maps with things like the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the Balfour Declaration, basically planting the seeds for the conflicts that are still going on right now. Which brings us right to the end, to the big, crucial question. When you look back at all this incredibly long, tangled history of faith, power, and identity, you have to ask, are these clashes between civilizations just inevitable? Is this just how it's always going to be? Or is there some way to actually mend these deep, old fault lines that have been shaping our world for more than 1,000 years? 最後までご視聴ありがとうございました。もし気に入っていただけたらな、チャンネル登録、高評価、いいねボタン、共有ボタンでお友達に拡散、通知設定などしていただけると幸いです。